In today's video, you'll learn something that can really help you. So like it and subscribe so you don't miss the next ones. Let's get started.
The forest ranger Tarek stopped the jeep in the middle of the trail and froze, unable to breathe. There, about 30 meters away, was an adult snow leopard, a rare, powerful animal with nearly 60 kilos of muscle. And beside it, leaning against its body as if it were the most natural thing in the world, there was a dog, an old golden retriever with honey-colored fur and a muzzle whitened by time. The leopard was lying down. The dog, too. The two were sleeping together. Tarek stood still for almost 10 minutes, not knowing what to do. He had worked in that mountain reserve for 15 years. He had seen bears, wolves, storms that tore trees from the ground. But this had no name. When he returned to the camp and told his colleagues, no one believed him, until he showed the photos. The image spread across the internet within hours. People wanted to know, who was that dog? Why didn't the leopard attack? What had happened between the two for a predator of that size to sleep beside a domestic dog as if they were old friends? The answer was 6 years in the past, on a winter afternoon that Tarek never forgot, but that only he and a few people from that region knew completely. It all began with a loss. The dog was called Amber. She had arrived at the reserve as a companion to a family that lived in the village near the forest. She was gentle, curious, with that genuine golden retriever way of liking everyone. That winter, she had given birth to 5 healthy puppies who lived in the family's heated barn. But on a November morning, when the snow blocked the paths and the wind cut through to the bones, something happened in the mountains. An avalanche struck a remote area of the reserve. When Tarek went to check the damage, he found a partially buried cave, and inside it, for snow leopard cubs, alone, trembling, making a thin and desperate sound. Their mother was nowhere to be found. Tarek searched for 2 full days. He didn't find a single trace. The cubs urgently needed food and warmth. And that was when the most unlikely idea he had ever had in his life came to him. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and tell in the comments what you thought and which city or country you're watching from. Tarek was not a veterinarian. He had no formal training to care for wild cubs. But he had something that, at that moment, was worth more than any degree. He knew Amber closely. The dog had just lost one of her 5 puppies the night before, the smallest of the litter, who didn't survive the cold. She was restless, pacing in circles in the barn, with that milk that needed to be given to someone. Tarek looked at the 4 leopard cubs wrapped in his coat and made a decision he couldn't even explain to himself. He took them to Amber. Her first reaction was one of strangeness. She stepped back, sniffed them, stepped back again. The cubs were too small to pose any threat, but they smelled different. They smelled wild, like the mountains, like something her instinct recognized as danger. Tarek stood still in the corner of the barn, holding his breath. Then Amber lowered herself. Slowly, carefully, she lay down beside the 4 cubs and let them come closer. They found warmth and milk as if they had always belonged there. She closed her eyes. Tarek left the barn without making a sound and stood outside, leaning against the wooden wall, with his throat tight in a way he hadn't expected. In the days that followed, he observed something he had never seen described in any book. Amber not only nursed the cubs, she cleaned them, warmed them with her body, growled softly when one of them wandered too far. She treated all 4 exactly as she treated her own puppies, with no visible distinction. The cubs grew quickly. Within a few weeks, they were already crawling around the barn, competing for space with Amber's puppies, nibbling on her ears, sleeping piled on top of her belly, as if the world were nothing more than that warm and protected place. It was at that time that Tarek began to notice something disturbing. The leopard cubs were stronger. They grew faster. And as the weeks passed, it became increasingly clear that Amber was becoming exhausted. Nursing 8 puppies, 4 of them from a completely different species, with needs her body was not made to meet, came at a high cost. She ate more, slept more, and even so she visibly lost weight. Tarek began to supplement their feeding with a special mixture, but the damage had already been done. Amber had given everything she had, without calculating the cost. The months passed. The 4 leopard cubs grew in a way that left Tarek speechless. He had given them names in silence, only to himself, as a way to tell them apart in the notes he kept in an old notebook stored in the office drawer. Kale, the largest, who always ate first and pushed the others aside with his shoulder. Suri, the only female, who observed everything before acting as if she calculated every movement in advance. David, the most curious, who sniffed anything new as if the entire world were a puzzle to solve. And Breck, the quietest, who spent hours lying beside Amber, even when the others had already gone off to explore every corner of the barn. Amber treated them like her own children. But as they grew, something changed. It wasn't hostility. It was nature. The cubs began to show behaviors that no dog could teach. They leapt from heights that were frightening. They disappeared for hours into the forest that began just behind the barn and returned with their fur damp from snow, their eyes lit with something that had no name in a domestic language. Amber stayed at the door, waiting, with that patience she had for everything. Tarek knew that balance would not last forever. The question was not if the leopards would leave. Amber had grown old. The fur that was once golden and dense had become lighter at the edges, especially around her muzzle and front paws. She moved more carefully, avoiding the steep terrain she once crossed without thinking. Tarek reduced their walks, adjusted her diet, and installed a thicker bed in the barn. He did all of this quietly, like someone caring for someone who doesn't ask for help but clearly needs it. The reserve had changed as well. A prolonged drought the previous summer had pushed animals into different areas, altering routes and entire territories. Tarek recorded everything in the same old notebook, but lately he spent more time near the barn than out in the open field. On an October afternoon, he heard the wolves.
Your like helps this video reach more people who also enjoy this topic. If you're enjoying it, click there and subscribe to the channel. By the way, I'm curious, what do you think of the video? Leave your comments and tell us your country or city.
It wasn't unusual. They had been roaming the region for years, keeping a respectful distance from the inhabited area. But the sound was too close, and there was something different in the tone, an agitation that Tarek recognized even before he understood what it meant. He ran. He found Amber cornered in a clearing less than 200 meters from the barn. 3 adult wolves formed a semicircle around her. She stood still, not backing away. With that posture, Tarek knew. It wasn't exactly courage, it was resignation. The kind of someone who has lived enough not to fear what comes next. Tarek shouted. The wolves glanced at him briefly, but did not move. And then something changed in the air. It wasn't an immediate sound. It was a presence. As if the temperature had suddenly dropped a few degrees and silence had swallowed even the wind. The wolves noticed it before Tarek. The one in front lowered its head and stepped back. The other 2 turned their bodies sideways, the clearest signal in animal language that something greater had just entered the equation. Kale stepped out of the tree line first, then Suri, then David, and finally, moving slowly and in absolute silence, Breck. The 4 adult leopards advanced toward the clearing without running, without vocalizing, without any hurry. They simply advanced, and the wolves left. Amber stood in the center of the clearing. Tar did too. Neither of them could move for a long moment. Then Kale approached Amber slowly, lowered his head, and gently pressed his muzzle against hers. Tarek never told this story to anyone for years, not because he thought no one would believe it, although he knew most wouldn't, but because there was something about it that seemed to belong only to that place, to that forest, to those creatures, as if putting it into words would diminish what had happened. But then he took that photo, and the whole world wanted to know. In the months that followed the day in the clearing, the 4 leopards did not disappear. They continued to frequent the area around the barn. Not constantly, not like domestic animals, but with a regularity that Tarek learned to recognize. Kale would sometimes appear in the early hours of the morning, standing at the edge of the forest, watching. Suri was seen twice, sleeping on a high point from where she could see the barn door. Davin and Breck moved around the perimeter, as if that place was, in some way, still their territory. Amber knew they were there. Tarek could tell by the way she moved when she got close to those areas. More slowly, with her muzzle raised, her tail wagging differently. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. She lived for 2 more years after that October afternoon. In the end, it was a quiet February morning. Tarek found her lying on the thick bed in the barn, her fur warmed by the sunlight coming through the small window. She wasn't in pain. She was simply still, the way she had always been when she wanted the world to know she was fine. He stayed with her. That same night, the 4 leopards appeared together at the edge of the forest and stood there for a long time, looking toward the barn. Tarek saw them from the window. He did nothing. He just let it be. There was a logic in the world that he could not explain with any of the tools he had. Not science, not 15 years in the field, not anything he had read or heard. But it was there. It was real. And it had begun with a dog who chose to stay when she could have run away. The care Amber gave without asking for anything in return came back in a way she never planned, and that no one could have predicted. That's how it works, sometimes. Not as a reward, simply as truth. If this story touched you, leave a comment sharing what you thought and which city or country you were watching from. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video.